This episode of the podcast is brought to you by KC Consulting.
Trying to promote your cannabis business or dispensary through traditional channels can be frustrating. There are federal laws against advertising on TV and radio, and advertising opportunities in general that are extremely limiting. KC Consulting is a premier social media marketing agency based in Dallas, Texas, that specializes in strategy, content creation, channel management, paid advertising, graphic design, and SEO/SEM services. The agency is hyper-focused on helping cannabis companies navigate through the uncharted waters that they've been forced to endure due to the lack of FDA regulation in regards to sales and marketing messaging. Don't take on the burden of managing your social media channels alone. Take control of your social media marketing efforts with KC Consulting. Email them today for a free quote at social@kcconsulting.co. That's social@kcconsulting.co. Add value, not noise. KC Consulting. Hello everyone, Kevin Carrillo here, and welcome to another episode of the Cannabinoid Connect podcast. My guest today is Jeff Apodaca, Vice Chairman of Santa Fe Farms LLC and CEO of Central Pivot. Mr. Jeff Apodaca, how are you, sir?
Hey, Kevin, how are you doing this morning?
I'm doing great. I'm really excited to be talking to you today. Thank you so much for making time for me and my audience.
Well, it's my pleasure, and hopefully I'll be a good interviewer. I'm functioning on 3 hours sleep today, so I might fall asleep on you halfway through.
Well, being a corporate media executive and former governor candidate of New Mexico in 2018, this is easy for you. You do this all the time, man. So I'm not worried about it.
I'm very nervous. I've never been on camera. No, I'm just kidding.
Awesome. Well, hey, for those listening, as I mentioned, I have Jeff Apodaca on. He is the Vice Chairman of Santa Fe Farms LLC and the CEO of Central Pivot. Santa Fe Farms is a preeminent local, national, and international leader in the production, extraction, and manufacturing and distribution of THC-free hemp-based phytocannabinoids. So, Jeff,
by the way, my English professor would say that's a big run-on sentence.
It's a run-on sentence, and that's the boilerplate that I read off from the press release. But you know, I want to hear it firsthand from you. But before we dive into your company, let's first get a sense of your background, which is quite impressive. So, why don't you walk us through everything that you've done in your life up to this point?
Well, I've been, Kevin, thank you so much, and it's great to be here. And if I recall, a fellow New Mexican I'm talking to, right?
Absolutely. Yep. Born and raised in New Mexico, raised in Belen, New Mexico. So shout out to the Eagles.
That's right. And I shout out to the Santa Fe Demons, state champs.
Nice.
I don't want to say what class, because then I'm going to give my age away, but it's been a while. But my background, I was born in Las Cruces, grew up, I always tell people I was born in Cruces, and I was raised in Cruces and matured in Santa Fe. When I was 12 years of age, my dad won for governor in New Mexico. My dad was actually the first Latino governor in the country.
Wow.
And so, that was kind of surprising for me in 1975. And so I graduated high school, played football in college. I wanted to be one of those guys. Back then, I was a Cowboy fan. So I wanted to play for the Dallas Cowboys. I'm now a Raider fan, by the way. And both teams are struggling this year. But I played football in college, and I studied broadcasting, and I, wanted to be a sports broadcaster. I wanted to be on the air. And back then, there weren't as many options as there was today. And I learned very quickly that, and I hate to say it this way, but it's the truth, that the guys making the decisions, the guys that drove the fancy cars, the guys that took me out to lunch and buy me lunch, were the guys running the business, not the guys in front of the camera.
Right.
And that intrigued me more than being in front of the camera. And I actually studied broadcast management. They had a degree back in the 80s at UNM, graduated from the University of New Mexico. And so I studied broadcast management, was fortunate. I interned. I tell all college graduates, I tell people in college and high school, do an intern wherever you can, meet and talk to people wherever you can. You never know who you're going to meet. I was fortunate enough where I got an internship at the NBC station in Albuquerque. And back then they owned TV and radio. There was no new media. And so they, about every 3 weeks, if I recall, they moved me to a different division. So for 3 weeks, I was in news, promotions, radio, sales, business development, programming. In my degree, I had to learn how to produce and make my own, um, you know, broadcast shows.
Right.
Yeah. So, then I started my career at the NBC affiliate here in Albuquerque. And I guess, when I was in New York doing some business a couple years later, I actually cold called all the networks and I got into the president of CBS. And I guess I impressed them at the age of 26. I was very fortunate where I got a job in business development at CBS Network and moved to New York. And then from there, I spent 10 years at CBS Television Network on the sports division, entertainment division, raised my hand, started doing new media. That took me to LA in 93. That took me to AOL. That took me to 16 years at Univision, starting new media projects for them and building a couple of divisions. So I was always the guy that raised my hand to do new ideas and new projects. And it took me new different places.
Yeah. Well, you know what I love about that mindset, and that's kind of how I was raised by my dad, was that he told me growing up, especially before I went to Pennsylvania for college, he said, Kevin, be open to opportunity. It was like anybody that asks you if you want to do something to be part of it, like, always have an open mind and don't be so quick to say no, because you don't want to close those doors of networking and opportunity, like you mentioned, you know? So I totally respect and get that. And what's also funny is how we're kind of relevant in our backgrounds is I had a first internship in college with NBC, but in Washington, DC, NBC,
Right.
Washington. And really enjoyed the experience, but very quickly understood that maybe journalism wasn't my area because of just how fast paced it was and how go, get the story no matter what, but anyway, so that kind of made put your trajectory for your background, right, in the corporate media space. So when did you decide to transition into politics?
Well, it wasn't really a game plan. I married a gal from Albuquerque. So I tell people I'm from Santa Fe, like I said, Las Cruces, Santa Fe. And then I married a gal. I actually met my wife here in Albuquerque at a wedding. She was living in San Francisco. She had got her MBA at State. She was working for a technology company, ended up taking a job at Disney in LA. We met about the same time. So we started dating while we lived in LA because I was in LA for 20 years. She was there for 16 of those years. And so we really ended up moving back home. So Univision sold in 2007. I stayed on board for the transition. But by 2010, we decided it was time for us to come home. We have twin boys that are 12, so they were just a year old at the time. And we always wanted to raise them here in New Mexico. So we moved back and actually I'd left Univision. When they found out I was moving back, they actually came and offered me a regional job to kind of run the Texas West properties. So I decided to do that. But wherever we've lived, I've always been involved, whether it's political or involved in the Cancer Society or involved with programs helping Hispanic or minorities lift up. So we got involved here. And actually, it was probably about 2015, 16, the Democratic Party came to me and wanted me to run for mayor of Albuquerque. And I kind of joked with them. I said, well, if you think I'm good enough to turn Albuquerque around, hell, why don't I just run for governor and turn the state around? I think I pissed off a lot of, traditional Democrats, but there was a lot of push for us to, they wanted somebody new, wanted something different. I grew up in politics, so I know politics, I know how it works. And I think our state just needed something new in a different direction.
Right.
So I decided to run and clearly came in second in the primaries, lost to who are now is our governor now. But we did okay coming out of the gate in our first time out. And I don't know. I'm sure you're going to ask me again. Is there going to be a run for you? I don't know. It's all about timing. Right now, I'm focused on the hemp industry and building the hemp industry.
Yeah. And that's really what I'm really interested in talking to you about. So, one other thing for your background, for those that don't understand, while again, it's very impressive, is Jeff is a cancer survivor. Isn't that right, Jeff?
It is 40 years.
40 years. Yeah. And from the research that I did and the Googling, I learned that you were one of the first medical patients to receive cannabis for your cancer treatment. Is that right?
Well, on the campaign trail, I was the first candidate that really pushed legalization. I think New Mexico should be legalized. Arizona just passed it. All the states around us, but Texas. So I think the state of New Mexico is missing out. But what I tell people all the time, I would say trivia question. What was the first state to have medical marijuana? And everybody always says California, whatever. It was actually New Mexico, 1978. And my father was governor. He signed it into law. And it was
Wow.
a 10-year research act for cancer patients, glaucoma, I believe. And it was a 10-year act with the University of New Mexico. And it was helping cancer patients. And I remember my father, the day he signed it, never knowing 2 years later, I got cancer my senior year in high school. So I was viciously ill, lost 38 pounds, lost all my hair. And so I remember I must have been 18 at the time, because I remember the first few months I didn't try marijuana. And so I remember the doctor saying, Governor, you signed it into law. I was having a really tough time through the chemotherapy. And so they convinced me to try medical cannabis for my chemotherapy back in 1980. So on the campaign trail, a lot of people said, well, you must have been one of the first patients. I never thought of it that way, but I guess I was, right? And so so my point is it worked for me. So I know the medical benefits of it.
Right.
So running for governor, I said, look, we have medical cannabis. We should expand the program. I believe we need to expand the program. They've limited the program in the state. And then I was for legalization, and I pushed all the other candidates for legalization. And unfortunately, 2 years later, we're still not legalized, and our governor and our legislators are still battling over how we should do it, which I think is ridiculous. But anyway,
Right.
on the campaign trail, people would talk to me about it, and they thought I was kind of stepping around the cannabis, the cannabis topic. But I'd say, no, I'm for legalization, and let me tell you how I'll do it. But let me tell you about this other plant. And there was a big push in New Mexico and a big push at the national level to legalize hemp growth. And I would tell people, I said, hemp has the same medical benefits, but let me tell you all these industries it can start. They can start manufacturing, they can start building materials, they can start fiber, herd, carbons, biofuels. Like I started listing all these things. And I told people, I said, New Mexico can actually lead the country in hemp production. We're a perfect environment, perfect state for it. 18% of our state is agriculture. We grow green chili and pecans, as you know, but the other big crop is alfalfa for basically our cattle and our dairy farms. A lot of alfalfa farmers don't make a lot of money. So anyway, I just kind of talked about the hemp industry.
Yeah.
After the campaign and I lost, I actually was approached by some friends of mine in the cannabis industry. The Farm Bill passed in 2018. New Mexico had already legalized it the year before about growing hemp. So it was the first season in 2019 to grow. And so I actually raised about $1.2 million. I threw in some money, somebody threw in some money. We raised some capital. And at the time, I had a consulting company called 47. And it's not my football number. We're the 47th state. And what we did was
1912.
Exactly, 1912. And so my consulting company did is we helped New Mexico businesses grow and expand outside the state of New Mexico. And so I raised some capital. Really what we were going to do was we were going to seed hemp startups in New Mexico. And with my contacts, I was going to help them grow outside the state of New Mexico. So that's what our fund and our investment was going to do. What I learned very quickly, I literally walked about 300 farms that season. There were 413 licensed farmers in the state of New Mexico to grow hemp the first year. As you know, everybody in the world overgrew, right? Collapsed the market. But what I noticed very quickly doing my research is, one, I don't want to get in the extraction business, at least not now. Everybody was getting into it. It was very expensive. And I saw the market was going to crash with the supply and demand.
Yeah, because you need so much capital to create a plant, an extraction lab, right? I mean, to get one of those things operating.
At the time, everybody was paying, the average lab invested and built a lab that was going to cost them about $2,000 a kilo to make oil when the market was at $4,000 or $5,000 a kilo. So you could double your profits.
Right.
Well, I just anticipated the market to drop. So I was so nervous about that. I stayed out of that field. And sure enough, today the market has dropped where you're buying kilos at $800. So the extractors that opened in 18 and 19, for every kilo they extract today, they're losing $1,500 to $2,000. And that's why some of the biggest extractors are going out of business, right? So we stayed out of that. But what I noticed very quickly, Kevin, is that that the farmers needed help. The farmers were planting, the farmers are growing. No one really knew what the genetics was. No one really knew how to grow this plant. I had friends that were some of our partners that knew the plant very well. They could grow the plant. So I started a company called High Desert Hemp that we basically consulted high desert hemp farms and we are going to help them get it to the market. So really, we started a I call it post harvesting. We basically came in, we consulted with the farmers, and we came in and harvested, and we bought $1 million worth of equipment, harvesting equipment. We stripped the plants. We can take the buds completely off, protect the stalk. We then can take the stalk, decorticate it, make it into hurd and fiber. We can then make biomass. We can make flour. And we also have industrial dryers that we can dry 1,000 pounds an hour per dryer on these industrial dryers. So whereas taking the farmers, literally 4 to 6 weeks to harvest 10 acres, we could literally do 10 acres in 2 or 3 days.
And that's both for cannabinoid therapeutic use as well as industrial hemp for material goods. So there's no waste. There's no waste of the plant at all. Yeah.
No waste at all. I mean, the only thing we do is we cut the plant. We tell the farmers leave the root in the ground, and that'll be fine. But we cut the plant. Basically, we strip the plant first with our harvesting equipment. And we can literally harvest 32 acres a day.
Yeah.
What slows us down even more is because we have 5 industrial dryers. What slows us down even more is that sometimes we can't dry as fast. Now, what's helped us this season is because it was such a dry climate and we didn't get any rain for like the last month. It did help us dry a little bit faster because it was drier and we could dry out on the field before it got there. But right. So that's kind of what we do with the farmers. And now my company merged with Santa Fe Farms back in September. Stephen Gluckstern, the chairman and founder, with a couple other farmers, Gary and Cole, they started Santa Fe Farms. I actually went to Stephen and said, hey, let me help you harvest your farm. He says, hey, you and I want to get in the industrial. We are actually raising capital to build a 100,000 square foot facility here in Albuquerque at Mesa del Sol. He was raising capital to build him a facility. And so he kind of came to me and said, look, instead of us partnering as a service provider, why don't we just merge our companies? And we both kind of saw the direction of the industrial side of the business. Mm-hmm. And so we partnered, Stephen and I partnered back in September. And so now High Desert Hemp is now really, we partnered with some other people in Colorado. So we actually changed it to Center Pivot. So that harvesting service is now called Center Pivot. And we're now doing business in Colorado, New Mexico. We're expanding into Montana and California, and hopefully Texas.
So I have a follow-up question there. So it's amazing that y'all are hyper focused on the industrial hemp market because, I've had guests on the podcast and I would say the majority of the experts that come on are focused on the cannabinoid side, right? And there's a huge opportunity in industrial hemp, no doubt about it. But while the cannabinoid side is so in its infancy, even still, while states are legalizing and hemp's legal now at a nationwide level, like I can't imagine the industrial hemp side being even more of an infancy stage, right? I mean, is the supply chain there yet? Like where are we at in terms of actually producing these goods? Like you said, that will do good for the environment and kind of maybe replace some industries that have been operating as we've known it.
So the herd market is at its infancy, and the herd market is there to sell raw herd for multiple different things, anywhere from bedding, from fiber to animal feed to basically building material. We're negotiating. I can't talk about it right now. We're negotiating with a couple of companies around the world to bring them to the United States and build building materials with our company next year. And so the fiber is already there, but you're correct. I mean, we're talking to some of these providers, and the fiber side is basically talking about, hey, that's great. You can bring me 3 million tons. I need 30 million tons if I'm going to switch over to hemp fiber, right? So we're in the process of doing that and growing more each year. But you're right. The CBD market's going to continue to grow. We're always going to be in that space, right? And right now, that's probably 70-80% of our space, Kevin. But within the next 2 years, we think that's going to only be about 10% of our space. Mm-hmm. We have launched a new division called Santa Fe Brands. Beth runs that for us. We'll be rolling out some of our own retail CBD brands and health and beauty products in the next 6 months. So, like I said, we're rolling out a retail division, but we also have all these other divisions that we're doing on the wholesale raw material side, and we're going down the carbon, biofuels, bioplastics divisions too, which will be producing a lot of that raw material for companies by next season.
Yeah. And maybe one day you'll be living in a hempcrete house, right? I mean, that's also another way. Yeah.
One of our goals. We're dealing with builders and 3D designers right now. By next season, we'll be building that type of building materials. And Albuquerque, we've partnered with Mesa del Sol. Mesa del Sol owners are some of our investors and some of our partners. We're going to be building.
And for those who don't know who Mesa del Sol is, go ahead and explain. That's just
Mesa del Sol is the largest industrial development in the country here in Albuquerque, and it's going to be residential. Netflix just moved in. Netflix just announced they're expanding their operation there. There's 3 or 4 other movie production companies going there. There's nuclear research, bio research. There's a renewable energy research doing there and manufacturing there. So to bring the hemp industry right there also, and so especially when we're talking about carbons and bioplastics and renewables, to have some of these research development companies right there, there are going to be 35,000 homes built in that area in the next 10 years. So for us to be able to work with the local contractors and home builders to say, hey, we've taken 6 lots. We purchased 6 lots out there. We're going to build model homes by next season of hemp homes out there to really show the market we can do this. And there's 0 carbon homes. Right. So we're looking at all that stuff.
What is the education level, Jeff, like among your peers, both, on the corporate side and the political side, when it comes to the endless benefits of the cannabis plant, right? Both, like we said, talked about on the therapeutic side, the industrial side. Like, are they surprised when you're telling them about, how environmentally sustainable it is, how it can be used to, create material goods, like we've talked about, biofuels, other things? Are they shocked by this information, or do they know it?
I think 80% of them are shocked. There's a handful of legislators that know it and are really pushing and helping the industry. There's a couple of city council people that understand it. And then the environmentalists are very way behind it. But it's as simple as this. The thing about the hemp plant is it can create jobs within agriculture. It already is doing that. It can create jobs in manufacturing. It can create jobs in research. The University of New Mexico is one of the top bio research institutions in the country. We're already having conversations with them how we can use our raw materials, and they can test bio hemp elements right here in New Mexico. And then our goal is to be manufacturing those in the next 2 or 3 years. So, the thing about it is we have not a whole division. We have a couple of people in our company that's all they do. They're advocates for the hemp industry, the hemp plant. They go out and talk to Washington. They go out and talk to our state legislators. We have a lot of support from our state legislators because they see a great opportunity across the board, and they are amazed. When I spoke at the state legislative budget review about a month ago before they go into session, and I got calls we did a whole Zoom thing. I got calls and text messages from the legislators saying, "Man, I didn't know you guys could do all that." Let's remind, I'm sure your listeners, let's remind everybody that the hemp plant was our first paper, was our first wood, was our first clothing, was our first medicines, was our first tobaccos. Everybody attacked hemp because DuPont wanted it off the market. The tobacco guys wanted it off the market. The cotton guys wanted it off the market. You can grow hemp every 120 days and make a house. It takes you 20 years to grow a tree.
That's right. 100%. Yes. And it's been like, even like you said earlier, we would feed our livestock and cattle, right? The hemp seeds, and it would sustain them and whatnot. It's just been a part of human existence for a long time, not to mention the science that's now showing that our endocannabinoid system is married biologically to these plants, which contain cannabinoids, right?
Right.
It's very incredible. And why I'm really excited to talk with you, Jeff, is because you see this from 2 kind of different lenses, right? And you have that platform and voice at the political level and the corporate level to start to educate some of these leaders in those fields. So what do you see, like, from a political stance? Like, moving this plant forward in the future? I keep hearing people saying with a blue wave, if the Democrats win the Senate, we're going to look at federal legalization. I don't know if that's going to happen right away. I mean, do you foresee that happening? And if so, like, how long will this take?
I don't see. I don't. I think very much like the hemp, like on the cannabis side. Um, I see if the feds legalize it, I don't see them legalizing it as federal use. I think what they'll do is very much like they did the hemp. They'll decategorize it, make it a Schedule 5 instead of a Schedule 1. They'll make it federally legal per state and then leave it up to the states, right? And I'm also a big constitutionalist on the political side. So I do believe the states have more power than the federal government in a lot of cases. So I think the feds will do that. But there's also a push at the Republican side. I mean, let's make this very clear. The Republicans, McConnell and the Republicans from the southern states are the ones that actually put it in the Farm Bill and actually pushed it through the Senate in 2018. So let's remember there's Republican support too. Now, let's be very frank. The biggest reason there's Republican support is they're getting pushed from the senators in Kentucky, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia. What are those big states? Tobacco states.
Right.
The tobacco farmers want to get into the smoking side of the hemp industry, and it's a way that they can see an opportunity. So the tobacco industry is pushing this also, which is helping everybody.
Right. And when I'm confused when you say that Mitch McConnell helped push that farm bill through, which I don't doubt that, but I'm confused because I read an article recently that he applauded in the stimulus package that there was no reference of banking laws to protect banks from operating and working with cannabis companies. So it's almost like a catch-22 because we're happy about it from an agricultural standpoint, especially that we talked about maybe for cannabinoids, industrial hemp, but when it comes to actually operating in the space, using banks and whatnot, the support doesn't seem to be there. I just don't understand.
Well, and again, on the on the recreational and the medical marijuana cannabis side, you're correct there. But on the hemp side, they've actually just come out with some new guidelines for the banking industry. Some of the big interstate banks, which I think is going to help New Mexico banks more than anything else. Some of the bigger banks, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, some of those, going to probably stay away from it. But I've been reached out. I mean, we bank with a local community bank here in Albuquerque. They have been very supportive and very aggressive with us about banking. I have opened up the doors for the Community Bank Association for the hemp industry here in New Mexico. Our goal is to do it in Colorado, Texas, and other states also. So the community banking, which is in New Mexico specifically, Kevin, as you know this, our interstate banking has actually hurt our state because they take our deposits and leave the state of New Mexico, and Wells Fargo invests 99% of our money outside the state of New Mexico. Community banks, I tell everybody all the time, business should be banking with community local banks because their goal is to invest back into our state. And as you know, New Mexico, we're not Texas, we're not California, we're not even Arizona or Denver, where we have a lot of institutional money coming in. In fact, our institutional money comes in, picks off our startups and have them move our state, right? Leave our state. So I think it's extremely important. So on the banking side, and I think it's happening across the board in every state, on the banking side, the smaller community banks are getting very involved in the hemp business and even in the cannabis business. And I think they'll be the leaders on the banking side.
That's encouraging to hear. I didn't know about that. More banks are open, at least to the farm bill, the agricultural side of it. And that's good because that ultimately helps everyone, right? The farmers, and it kind of cuts through all that red tape that they've been experiencing over the past couple of years.
Oh, absolutely.
And so Jeff, you talked about how your business is 70 to 80% focused on the cannabinoid side. So from a regulation standpoint, for now, yeah. Sorry to make that clear. Yeah. So in the current state of things, like how difficult is it to operate on that side of the business with the lack of FDA consumer oversight regarding CBD and other cannabinoids?
Well, New Mexico, I got to give credit to the legislators because it was really the legislator that pushed that. And I'm not sure about every other state. Delta 9s are a little bit different by state, as your listeners will know. But New Mexico, actually, with our manufacturing license, we can actually take in hot material. So as long as the material's not hot at harvesting time, but we actually doing through our post-harvesting and processing with our other manufacturing partnerships, we can actually have hot material. So if the farmer goes hot after it's harvested, we can actually take, the farmer can't, but we can actually take that product and we can make products out of it. It's just the final retail product has to go out below 0.3 or within FDA or state guidelines.
See, that makes sense. I think that makes a lot of sense.
So New Mexico had the vision. And again, a small group of legislators that understand this plan, as you know, through the processing, Stephen, our chairman, loves to say this. The hemp plant is the only agricultural plant or the only agricultural thing that when you cut that, you have to process that plant to get anything out of it, right? I mean, if you're growing chilies, onions, bananas, pineapples, oranges, pecans, you just pluck it and it's ready to eat. With the hemp plant, there's some type of process that has to go through, whether you want to take it to herd, fiber, or oils, or smokables. So New Mexico saw that because we educated our legislators, and they knew that during the processing form, it can go hot and will go hot. So we have to just remediate the THC below that 0.3 levels. Now, there's also a push. The House has already passed it. I believe it's going to get done either way. There's also a push at the federal level to basically take that made up 0.3 THC level to 1.0. Because let's be very frank, the hemp plant growing the CBD medicines, it's going to grow. It could go to 0.4, 0.5 as it goes up.
Sure.
Keeping it below 0.3 is very difficult. And as you know, the THC factor doesn't even kick in until it's up well above 0.10.
Right. And I've heard that the DEA is even trying to, or I don't know if they're doing it now, but at one time they were trying to even lower that percentage to like 1%, which it could make it even virtually impossible to grow.
0.1%. Yeah. 0.1%.
Yeah. 0.1%. Yeah.
0.1%. Yeah.
So I'm glad
if you did that, you literally couldn't grow hemp.
Right. And, it goes back to that education factor, right? Because as we've talked to scientists and other people that really understand the medicinal benefits of the cannabinoids, it's more productive and better for you to have that full spectrum entourage effect than just isolating one cannabinoid, right? And you're kind of seeing that in California where there's such a hype around THC and the potency levels of THC that people are just smoking those joints that have little other, they're just isolated with THC and they're kind of missing out on all the other benefits, Well,
and I'm not I use CBD oils and CBD rubs. I'm not a big smoker. I don't like smoking. And so I want the medical benefits of it. And again, we are already remediating the THC out within our facility. So we have extracting partnerships and then we can remediate it out within our own lab. And so our goal is to take as many farmers' products as we can, even if it's hot. Again, we can take it in hot and then we process it, whether our offloads, whether our vendors want full spectrum crude or full spectrum distillate. It's all depending on different things. But our goal is to take all the THC out because when the FDA approves it, or a majority of the users right now, the end users, they don't even want to deal with THC. So our goal is to remediate everything out. When we take it to oil, not just biomass, we take it to oil, our goal is to remediate everything out because that's what the market's going to demand.
Right. And hey, you got to navigate with kind of what's working right now based on the regulations that are in place, right? So I totally understand that.
Even when you look at CPG companies, consumer product good companies, even the conversation we're having at the big level, yes, they're waiting for the FDA, right? So I think we're on hold with those, but you're going to see an explosion of CBD products around the world when the FDA approves this for food and other products. So we're already having those conversations. But I can tell you right now, whatever conversations we have, we literally track the seed to the plant, to the farm, to our facility, to the final product. We track it from seed to retail spot. And the CPG companies, the FDA, when they approve that, that's exactly what they're going to want. And all of them are going to want non-THC products.
Right. Well, and like we've seen so much public support from this past election, the 5 states passing. Recently, we've even seen at the global level where cannabis was descheduled or totally removed from the single convention on narcotics within the UN. So do those kind of moves kind of point to what's to come? Like even at a global level, there's more acceptance to this plant?
I do, especially on the hemp side. I think hemp is worldwide. I think there's some countries that's an opportunity for the U.S. that are still kind of behind the eight ball. So if the U.S., this could be a brand new agricultural. Again, you can create agricultural jobs, research jobs, manufacturing jobs, and retail jobs. Just in the state of New Mexico, we're looking at 16,000 jobs when industrial hemp's full throttle. So yes, I do think it's becoming more and more, and people still get confused between the hemp plant and the cannabis plant. And I know they're cousins, but I try to explain to people, even some friends this weekend, they're like, hey, here comes the drug dealer guy. They think I'm in the medical marijuana business. They think I'm in the recreational business. Hemp is not that at all. No. Same medical benefits, but I try to explain to my friends, I sell non-alcoholic beer with medical benefits. They get that. That's what's the funny thing is they understand that part.
Yeah, well, Jeff, you should tell them to listen to the podcast, man. I think they could learn some things.
I'll share it with everybody.
Thank you. Hey, so here's another question to pivot on that. Okay, I've read Market Watch articles, seen figures of charts where they're talking about, I don't even know the year, but I think by 2027 or something like that, this is expected to be a $25 billion industry or something like that. Now, are they accounting for industrial hemp as well?
They are not. That is just the CBD market. So I'm like you, everything everybody's talking about right now, even some of our early investment numbers that we're looking to investors and industrial investors looking at, institutional investors looking at, we're forecasting all based on CBD. And right now, according to Forbes and according to the studies, in the last 2 years, you've seen CBD use go from 14% to 18%. So only 18% usage in the world right now. But as the FDA approves it, I think you're going to see at least a 50, 60% drop. So those numbers are going to continue to grow. But Kevin, you're right. Those numbers that you're reading, everybody's showing the numbers, the growth numbers on the CBD side, on the cannabinoid side, but they're not, and we're not even talking about terpenes yet. Like there's a whole terpene, we're already doing stuff in terpenes right now. So there's medical benefits, there's terpenes. And if you're listeners, I'm not a terpene expert, but terpenes are the one that gives you the smell and the flavor. And every fruit has terpenes. There's very healthy terpenes in the hemp plant that we're already extracting, and we're going to be moving those too. And that's for food products and for smells and all different things that give you different elements. And so no one's even calculating the industrial side. And so I think we're not even we're in the first month of pregnancy on the industrial side.
Right. Well, Jeff, I gotta just give you so much credit, man. Like you can tell, like hearing you and your background talking about how your dad was a former governor and really kind of pushed the whole medical cannabis into New Mexico. It's inherent that the passion for the plant is in your DNA, and it's great to see that you're always raising a hand when it comes to different industries and things where it not only helps the good of society, right, but it also helps the environment, right? So, and one other thing I want to commend you on is I know that you have a TV show, and this is it's called Meet in the Middle Talk. Is that right?
Yeah, called Let's Meet in the Middle. And it's on hiatus right now because of COVID. We're probably going to bring it back in 21. We've been on hiatus for about 3 months. I'm probably going to bring it back a little bit different format. But the whole thing was every time I was on the campaign trail, even just having drinks with I'm more of a moderate Democrat, right? And most of our friends, most business leaders are moderates. So I try to explain to people, you realize that 70, 75, 80% of Americans were pretty much in the middle. It's the 20% fringe on both sides that are the loudest and have the time and the money, but they're the loudest. But the majority of us are in the middle. So politically, and it's not just a political show, we talk about a bunch of different things. And we're thinking about bringing it back for social media and for television again this year. So we went on hiatus, like I told you, because of COVID. But really, we talk about issues across the board and how we can compromise and come to the middle and really start the conversation with us. And then we bring politicians into that conversation. Hey, if we can meet in the middle, why can't you guys? Right. And let's stop worrying about the party divide and bring people together. So that's really, and we do that on social media too. I have 45,000 followers on Democrats for Democracy on Facebook. I have another small group, about 8,000 followers called New Mexico Minute, #NM Minute. And I don't post on that stuff all the time, but we have a committee that does on Democrats for Democracy. And we basically try and bring up issues about, that the average American actually wants to follow and wants to listen to.
And that's what's so encouraging is because, I mean, as we all know today, the political landscape is so divided and polarized, right? That
Oh, absolutely.
these guys can't even, you know, they can't get anything done because there's so much despite and opposition between the two sides that you can't even come to a consensus. And so it's great to see politicians that are actually reaching across the aisle and willing to have a conversation. And that's really what got me into the whole podcast scene. You know, it's too easy to take a soundbite or so take something out of context, whereas you can have a lengthy conversation and really get to know somebody. And I think that that's what we really did here today with you, Jeff. I really appreciate, man, all your insights and everything that you're doing for the state of New Mexico, which is where I was born and raised. And yeah, man, I mean, I want to have you on again as things
Anytime.
evolve. So
Kevin, anytime. And, you know, and look, we're still, you know, the great thing about the industry and the reason I guess I'm real excited about the industry is I try and tell people to summarize this is when I got in the TV world and I went to CBS Television Network in 1987, I guess it was, I worked with guys from the 50s that actually helped start television. The reason I left television and went to the internet and went to AOL and started AOL Studios is because we were starting the internet, right? I don't want to say I started Spanish media, but we actually expanded Spanish media and I brought new media to the Spanish world. That's what I did there. And really what's really exciting is I'm an entrepreneur by heart. I've just done it for big companies. Now we're doing it for New Mexico and for our investors and our group. But really, we're starting an industry. This is the start of a new industry. We haven't grown hemp in this country in 200 years. We haven't been in the hemp business for 200 years. So we're actually, our goal here at Santa Fe Farms is not only to be a successful company, but to also create an industry based here in New Mexico and be one of the leaders. We feel there'll be 3, maybe 4 hemp leaders in the United States. We know for a fact we're going to be one of them, based right here in Albuquerque.
love it. Yeah, I can't wait to see all that unfold. Before we go, Jeff, where can people find your website, and then go ahead and say the social media groups that you mentioned earlier, the Facebook groups and stuff.
So if you want to contact me or Santa Fe Farms, you can just go to Santa Fe Farms LLC. .com. So Santa Fe Farms LLC.com. You can find us there. On social media, we're on social media also. And then again, my Facebook, we have a group on Facebook called New Mexico Minute. And we also have Democrats for New Mexico Democrats for Democracy. So NMD4D at NMD4D on Facebook. And then, you know, I'm on social media, stuff like that. You just Google me. You can find me on LinkedIn. Just look for Jeff Apodaca. But if you want to look at Santa Fe Farms, just keep a look at Santa Fe Farms. We're expanding around the country, working with farmers around the country, working with extractors around the country. We have some great experts within our company that have built industries across the board. And so that's really what we're focused on. So yeah, I look forward to hearing from anybody that wants to reach out to us and want to grow. We're working with genetics. Our goal right now is to come to the farmer and say, here are the best genetics in your region that grows. Grow this for us. And actually, we're tracking over 21 different genetics in the country. And our goal is to get down to the best genetics within those regions or those states and go to those farmers and say, grow this. This is what the market will demand. And then we'll work with them to get it to the market for them.
That's awesome. Well, you heard it from Jeff firsthand. He's open to y'all reaching out and working together as they work to expand across the country and even internationally. So, Jeff, thanks again for your time. I really want to run it back with you again in the new year as things progress. So we'll be in touch, man.
You got it, Kevin, and good luck to you. And thanks a lot for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you all for listening. Bye.
Talk soon.